Sarah Martinez had never imagined she would find herself standing in the middle of a military training camp, surrounded by towering men who looked like they could crush her with their bare hands. At barely 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing just over 100 pounds, she seemed completely out of place among the hardened soldiers. Preparing for advanced marksmanship training, the morning sun beat down mercilessly on the desert training ground as Sarah adjusted her ill-fitting uniform for what felt like the 100th time. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced as whispers and snickers followed her every move. She had enlisted 6 months ago, driven by a deep desire to serve her country and prove that size didn't determine capability. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her to shoot when she was just 12 years old during their weekend trips to the local range. Those peaceful Sunday afternoons had become her sanctuary, where the world fell silent except for the controlled breathing and the perfect moment of release. But this was different. This was the real deal, and everyone around her seemed to know it except her. The other recruits had already formed their groups, sharing stories of their previous military experience or their impressive shooting records from back home. Sarah felt like an outsider looking in, carrying the weight of every doubtful glance and dismissive comment. When Sergeant Davis called for attention, the entire group snapped into formation. Sarah noticed how the other soldiers subtly positioned themselves away from her, as if her inexperience might somehow be contagious. The sergeant's weathered face scanned the group, his eyes lingering on Sarah for what felt like an eternity. She could practically hear his thoughts questioning why she was there. The first day consisted of basic weapons familiarization and safety protocols. Sarah listened intently to every instruction, taking mental notes while others seemed to already know the material by heart. When they moved to the shooting range for initial assessments, she felt a familiar calm wash over her. This was her element, even if nobody else realized it yet. The weight of the rifle felt natural in her hands, like greeting an old friend after a long absence. As she prepared for her first shot, she could hear muffled laughter from behind her. Someone whispered about hoping she wouldn't hurt herself, while another made a joke about her needing a stepladder to see over the rifle. Sarah blocked out the noise, focusing on her breathing just like her father had taught her all those years ago. The target seemed miles away, but she knew she could reach it. She had to reach it. The morning ended with mixed results for most recruits, but Sarah's performance was quietly noted by the instructors. She hadn't said much, hadn't boasted about her abilities, and certainly hadn't made any friends yet. But something about her quiet confidence and the way she handled her weapon caught the attention of those who knew what to look for. As the group dispersed for lunch, Sarah remained behind, carefully cleaning her rifle with the methodical precision her father had drilled into her. She knew the real test was still to come, and she could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would need to prove herself all over again in a world that seemed determined to count her out before she even had a chance to show what she could do. The second day of training brought with it a new level of intensity that Sarah hadn't anticipated. As she walked toward the advanced training facility, she could feel the eyes of her fellow recruits tracking her movement with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed amusement. The morning briefing had introduced them to the M24 sniper weapon system, a precision rifle that would separate the serious marksmen from those who were just going through the motions. Master Sergeant Thompson, a veteran with over 20 years of military service and countless confirmed kills under his belt, stood before the group with the authority of someone who had earned every stripe on his uniform. His reputation preceded him, and Sarah had heard the other recruits talking in hushed tones about his legendary accuracy and no-nonsense approach to training. When he began explaining the complexity and demands of precision shooting, Sarah hung on every word, while some of the larger, more confident soldiers seemed to tune out, apparently assuming their natural advantages would carry them through. The M24 was a beautiful piece of equipment, sleek and deadly in its precision engineering. As Thompson demonstrated proper handling techniques, Sarah studied every movement, every adjustment, every subtle detail that might give her an edge. She noticed how he positioned his body, how he controlled his breathing, and how he seemed to become one with the weapon during the demonstration shot that struck dead center at 600 yards. When it came time for individual handling assessments, Sarah watched as recruit after recruit stepped forward to demonstrate their familiarity with the system. Jackson, a former college football player from Texas who stood well over 6 feet tall, hefted the rifle with obvious confidence, making jokes about how this was going to be easier than hunting deer back home. His first attempt was respectable, hitting the target, but missing the center ring by several inches. Rodriguez, another recruit with previous military experience, fared slightly better but still fell short of the precision standards expected at this level. Then it was Sarah's turn. As she approached the rifle, she could hear the barely suppressed chuckles from behind her. Someone muttered something about needing a booster seat, while another voice wondered aloud if she could even lift the weapon properly. Thompson's stern glare silenced the comments, but the damage was done. Every eye was on her, waiting for her to fail and confirm their preconceived notions about her capabilities. Sarah picked up the M24 with reverence, feeling its weight and balance. It was heavier than the rifles she was used to, but the craftsmanship was immediately apparent. She spent several moments adjusting her position, ignoring the impatient shifting of feet behind her. This wasn't about speed, it was about precision, and precision required patience and preparation. As she settled into her shooting position, something remarkable happened. The nervous energy that had plagued her since arriving at the camp seemed to evaporate. Her breathing steadied, her pulse slowed, and the world around her faded into background noise. This was the zone her father had taught her to find, the place where doubt and distraction couldn't follow. Her first shot rang out across the range, and Thompson lowered his binoculars with a slightly puzzled expression. The target at 600 yards showed a clean hit just outside the center ring, better than most of the previous attempts. Sarah calmly adjusted her position and fired again. This time, Thompson's eyebrows rose noticeably as he confirmed another solid hit, this one even closer to the bullseye. The laughter had stopped. In fact, the entire range had fallen unusually quiet as Sarah prepared for her third shot. She could feel the shift in energy around her, the way skepticism was slowly giving way to something that might have been respect, or at least curiosity. When her third shot found its mark with even greater precision, Thompson made a note on his clipboard and gave her an approving nod. As she carefully set down the rifle and stepped back from the firing line, Sarah caught glimpses of the expressions around her. The easy dismissal was gone, replaced by something more complex. She had surprised them, and more importantly, she had surprised herself with how natural the M24 felt in her hands. By the third day of training, Sarah had begun to notice subtle changes in how she was being treated, though not all of them were positive. While some recruits had started to regard her with grudging respect after her performance with the M24, others seemed even more determined to prove that her success was just beginner's luck. The competitive atmosphere of the training camp had intensified, and Sarah found herself caught in the middle of a brewing storm of egos and expectations. During the morning equipment check, Private Collins, a cocky recruit from Colorado who claimed to have been hunting since he could walk, made it his personal mission to undermine Sarah's confidence. He would deliberately bump into her while she was preparing her gear, make loud comments about how the military was lowering its standards, and constantly question whether she had what it took to handle the pressure of real combat situations. The psychological warfare wasn't limited to Collins. A group of recruits had formed an unofficial alliance, united by their shared belief that Sarah's presence was somehow diminishing the prestige of their training program. They would exclude her from informal study sessions where they shared tips and techniques, leave her out of conversations about tactics and strategy, and create an atmosphere of isolation that was almost suffocating. Master Sergeant Thompson seemed to notice the tension building within the group, but he maintained his professional distance, allowing the recruits to work through their dynamics naturally. He understood that military units needed to find their own balance, and interference from instructors could sometimes do more harm than good. However, he also recognized genuine talent when he saw it, and Sarah's consistent performance was becoming harder for everyone to ignore. The day's training focused on long-range shooting under various environmental conditions. The instructors had set up targets at distances ranging from 800 to over 1,000 yards, with wind gauges and weather monitoring equipment providing real-time data that the recruits would need to factor into their shots. This was where natural ability would be separated from learned technique, and where the mental pressure of competition would really begin to show. Sarah approached each shooting station methodically, taking time to study the conditions and make careful calculations. While other recruits rushed through their attempts, eager to prove their speed and instinctive shooting abilities, she maintained her deliberate pace. Her shots were consistently accurate, but her careful approach drew criticism from those who valued quick decision-making over precision planning. Collins, in particular, made a show of completing his shots in half the time Sarah took, though his accuracy suffered noticeably. When Thompson pointed out the importance of patience and proper preparation, Collins argued that in combat situations, soldiers didn't have the luxury of taking their time. His comments were clearly directed at Sarah, and they had their intended effect of making her question whether her methodical approach was actually a weakness rather than a strength. The afternoon brought unexpected challenges, when a sudden weather shift created swirling crosswinds that made accurate shooting significantly more difficult. Several recruits struggled to adapt to the changing conditions, their shots going wide as they failed to properly account for the wind patterns. Sarah found herself drawing on lessons her father had taught her about, reading natural signs and feeling the subtle changes in air movement that could affect bullet trajectory. As she prepared for what would be her final shot of the day at the longest range, Sarah could feel the weight of everyone's attention focused on her. The target was barely visible at over 1,000 yards, and the wind conditions were far from ideal. Collins had already taken his shot and missed the target entirely, blaming the weather rather than his technique. Now it was her turn to either prove herself or confirm the doubts that still lingered about her abilities. The pressure was unlike anything she had experienced before. This wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about proving that she belonged among these elite soldiers and that her quiet confidence wasn't misplaced. As she settled into position and began her pre-shot routine, Sarah tried to block out the whispered conversations and betting going on behind her. Some were hoping she would succeed, but others were clearly expecting her to fail under the pressure. Her breathing steady and her focus narrowed to the tiny target in the distance. Sarah made her final adjustments and prepared to take the shot that would define how she would be viewed by her peers for the rest of their training together. The fourth day arrived with an unexpected announcement that would change everything. Commander Harrison, a decorated officer known throughout the military for his expertise in special operations and sniper tactics, would be visiting the training facility to observe the recruits and potentially select candidates for an elite precision shooting unit. The news sent shockwaves through the group, as everyone understood that being chosen by Commander Harrison could make or break a military career. Sarah felt the familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach as she prepared for what could be the most important day of her military life. The other recruits were openly discussing their strategies for impressing the commander, sharing stories they had heard about his legendary standards and his reputation for being able to spot exceptional talent from a single observation. The pressure that had been building over the past few days suddenly intensified to an almost unbearable level. Collins and his group seemed particularly energized by the commander's impending visit, convinced that this would be their opportunity to finally put Sarah in her place and demonstrate that their traditional approach to marksmanship was superior to her careful, methodical style. They spent the morning making increasingly bold predictions about their performance and openly questioning whether Sarah would be able to handle the pressure of performing in front of such a distinguished observer. When Commander Harrison arrived at the range, his presence was immediately felt by everyone present. He was a man who commanded respect without saying a word, his bearing and reputation speaking for themselves. Master Sergeant Thompson briefed him on the progress of the training program and the performance of individual recruits, though he kept his comments professional and avoided singling out any particular soldier. The commander's first observation session focused on basic marksmanship skills at moderate ranges. Sarah watched as her fellow recruits performed admirably, their shots grouping well within acceptable parameters. When her turn came, she felt the weight of the commander's intense gaze as he studied her technique through his binoculars. Her shots were clean and accurate, but she couldn't tell from his expression whether she had made any impression at all. The real test came during the afternoon session, when the commander requested a demonstration of long-range precision shooting under adverse conditions. The targets were placed at maximum range, and artificial wind machines were brought in to create challenging crosswind conditions that would test every aspect of the recruit's abilities. This was where natural talent, technical knowledge, and mental toughness would all be put to the ultimate test. As the exercises progressed, it became clear that the commander was taking detailed notes on each recruit's performance. Some soldiers rose to the occasion, delivering their best performances under the pressure of observation. Others seemed to crack under the intensity, their shots going wide as their nerves got the better of them. Collins, despite all his bravado, struggled noticeably with the challenging conditions, his frustration mounting with each missed shot. When it was Sarah's turn for the final evaluation, she could feel the collective breath of the entire group being held. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the ultimate test that would either validate her place among the elite shooters or confirm the doubts that still lingered about her capabilities. As she approached the firing line, she noticed Commander Harrison positioning himself directly behind her observation point, clearly intending to get the best possible view of her technique. The target seemed impossibly small at the extreme range, made even more challenging by the artificial wind conditions that were designed to push shooters to their absolute limits. Sarah took her time setting up, ignoring the impatient shuffling of feet behind her and focusing entirely on reading the conditions and making the necessary calculations. She could hear Collins whispering something about her taking too long, but she blocked out the distraction and concentrated on the task at hand. As she settled into her final shooting position, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before during training. Instead of the familiar calm that usually came over her, she felt a surge of adrenaline and determination that seemed to sharpen every one of her senses. This wasn't just about hitting a target anymore. It was about proving that she deserved to be there and that her quiet confidence was built on a foundation of real skill and dedication. The shot that followed would either launch her military career into the stratosphere or leave her questioning whether she had what it took to succeed in this demanding field. The moment Sarah's finger found the trigger, something extraordinary happened. All the noise, all the doubt, all the pressure seemed to evaporate into complete silence. Her breathing synchronized with the rhythm of her heartbeat, and her vision tunneled down to focus solely on the tiny target nearly 1,000 yards away. The artificial wind machines continued to create challenging cross-currents, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs that others missed. Feeling the air movement against her skin, and watching the way dust particles danced in the distance, her first calculation proved perfect. The bullet cut through the swirling air with precision that defied the difficult conditions, striking the target dead center with an audible impact that carried across the range. Behind her, she could hear the sharp intake of breath from Master Sergeant Thompson and the complete silence from the other recruits who had been expecting her to crack. Under the pressure, Commander Harrison lowered his binoculars and made a notation on his clipboard, his expression remaining unreadable, but Sarah caught something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. A flicker of genuine interest that suggested she had just accomplished something significant. Without a word, he gestured for her to continue with the remaining shots in the series. The second shot required adjustment for a shift in wind direction that Sarah detected by watching the movement of a small flag positioned halfway to the target. While other shooters might have rushed the shot or relied on their previous settings, Sarah took the time to recalculate and adjust her position accordingly. The bullet found its mark with even greater precision than the first, creating a grouping that would have been impressive under ideal conditions, let alone the challenging circumstances they were facing. Collins and his supporters had fallen completely silent now, their earlier bravado replaced by a growing realization that they were witnessing something special. Even Rodriguez, who had previously been one of the top performers in the group, was staring at the target display with obvious amazement. The kind of accuracy Sarah was demonstrating wasn't just good shooting. It was the kind of performance that separated true marksmen from those who were merely competent with a rifle. As Sarah prepared for her third and final shot, Commander Harrison moved closer to her position, clearly wanting to observe her technique from the best possible angle. She could feel his presence behind her, but rather than adding to her pressure, it seemed to focus her concentration even further. This was her chance to demonstrate not just accuracy, but consistency under the most demanding circumstances possible. The wind conditions had become even more challenging as the artificial machines were adjusted to create unpredictable gusts and shifting patterns. Sarah spent several minutes reading the conditions, making minute adjustments to her position and scope settings. She ignored the impatient movement from some of the other recruits, maintaining her methodical approach despite the building tension around her. When she finally took her shot, The result was nothing short of spectacular. The bullet struck the exact center of the target, creating a three-shot group that measured less than 2 inches at nearly 1,000 yards. In the world of precision shooting, this was the kind of performance that became legendary, the standard against which all other shooters would be measured. Commander Harrison set down his binoculars and walked directly to Sarah's position. For the first time since arriving at the training facility, his stern expression softened into something that might have been approval. He examined her rifle settings, studied her shooting position, and asked her several technical questions about her approach to reading wind conditions and making elevation adjustments. Sarah answered his questions clearly and confidently, explaining her techniques without boasting or trying to oversell her abilities. She described how her father had taught her to feel the subtle environmental changes that could affect bullet trajectory, and how she had spent years developing the patience and discipline necessary for true precision shooting. Commander Harrison listened intently, occasionally nodding as she explained concepts that clearly resonated with his own experience. When the evaluation was complete, Commander Harrison gathered all the recruits for his assessment of the day's performance. He commented on the overall quality of the group and highlighted several individuals who had shown particular promise under difficult conditions. But when he reached the end of his remarks, he looked directly at Sarah and made an observation that would change everything. The words he spoke next would not only validate Sarah's place among the elite shooters, but would also serve as a defining moment that would be remembered and repeated throughout her military career. Commander Harrison's words cut through the afternoon air with the authority of absolute certainty. I've observed thousands of shooters over my career, and I can tell you without hesitation that Martinez here has just demonstrated the finest precision shooting I've seen in years. Under these conditions, with this level of accuracy and consistency, she's proven herself to be the best shot in this group, and quite possibly one of the best natural marksmen I've encountered in my entire military career. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt her knees go weak as the full impact of the commander's statement hit her. After days of doubt, skepticism, and outright dismissal from her peers, she had not only proven herself, but had been declared the best among a group of elite soldiers by one of the most respected officers in the military. The validation was overwhelming, and she had to fight back tears of relief and pride. Collins stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, anger, and reluctantly dawning respect. The confident smirk he had worn for days had been completely wiped away, replaced by the stunned realization that his assumptions had been not just wrong, but spectacularly wrong. The other recruits who had joined in dismissing Sarah now found themselves re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about capability and potential. Commander Harrison continued his assessment, explaining to the group what separated truly exceptional shooters from those who were merely skilled. He pointed out that Sarah's success wasn't just about natural talent, but about her approach to the craft. Her patience, her attention to environmental factors, and her ability to maintain composure under pressure were all hallmarks of a world-class marksman. As the commander spoke, Sarah noticed subtle changes in the body language of her fellow recruits. Where once there had been dismissive glances and condescending attitudes, she now saw genuine curiosity and growing respect. Rodriguez was the first to approach her after the commander finished his remarks, offering congratulations and asking about her technique for reading wind conditions. Even more surprising was the change in Master Sergeant Thompson's demeanor. The gruff instructor who had maintained professional distance suddenly seemed genuinely interested in Sarah's development as a shooter. He pulled her aside after the group dispersed and told her that he had suspected she had exceptional potential from her first day on the range, but even he had been amazed by her performance under the commander's observation. Thompson explained that Commander Harrison rarely offered such definitive praise, and that his endorsement would open doors throughout Sarah's military career that might otherwise have remained closed. He also warned her that with recognition comes responsibility, and that she would now be held to the highest standards in everything she did. The days of being underestimated were over, but that meant the pressure to perform would only increase. Over the following days, Sarah found herself in an entirely different position within the group dynamic. Instead of being excluded from conversations, she was now sought out for advice and technique tips. Collins, humbled by his public embarrassment, eventually approached her with a grudging apology and a request to learn from her approach to long-range shooting. The transformation wasn't just in how others saw her, but in how Sarah saw herself. The quiet confidence she had always carried was now backed by official recognition from the highest levels of military leadership. She began to understand that her methodical approach, which had once been seen as a weakness, was actually her greatest strength as a precision shooter. Commander Harrison made arrangements for Sarah to receive advanced training opportunities that were typically reserved for soldiers with years of experience. He also indicated that she would be considered for immediate assignment to specialized units upon completion of her current training program, a prospect that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. As word of her exceptional performance spread through the training facility, Sarah realized that she had not only proven herself to her immediate peers, but had caught the attention of the broader military community. Officers and instructors who had never spoken to her before were suddenly taking notice of her progress and potential. The weight of expectation was heavy, but Sarah found herself energized rather than intimidated by the challenges ahead. She had fought for respect and earned it through pure skill and determination, proving that excellence could come from the most unexpected places, and that true capability couldn't be measured by physical size or preconceived notions about what a soldier should look like. 6 months after Commander Harrison's life-changing declaration, Sarah found herself standing in a completely different world. The advanced sniper school she now attended was populated by the military's most elite marksmen, soldiers who had been hand-picked for their exceptional abilities and potential for specialized operations. The days of being underestimated were firmly in the past, replaced by the weight of living up to a reputation she had never expected to earn. Her new classmates treated her with the respect accorded to someone who had proven herself beyond doubt. Stories of her legendary performance under Commander Harrison's observation had spread throughout the sniper community, growing slightly more impressive with each retelling. Sarah had become something of a legend herself, the small woman who had outshot seasoned veterans and earned recognition from one of the military's most respected officers. The training at the advanced school pushed every aspect of her abilities to new limits. She learned about ballistics calculations that went far beyond anything she had encountered before, studied meteorology to better understand how atmospheric conditions affected bullet trajectory, and mastered camouflage and concealment techniques that could mean the difference between life and death in combat situations. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah had learned to embrace her unique approach to marksmanship rather than trying to conform to others' expectations. Her methodical style, her patience under pressure, and her ability to read environmental conditions had become signature elements of her technique. Instructors now used her as an example of how natural talent combined with proper training and mental discipline could create truly exceptional performance. Collins, who had completed his basic training and been assigned to a conventional infantry unit, sent Sarah a letter acknowledging that his initial judgment had been completely wrong. He admitted that watching her success had taught him valuable lessons about humility and the danger of making assumptions based on appearances. His letter was one of many she received from former classmates who wanted to congratulate her on her achievements and express their newfound respect for her abilities. Master Sergeant Thompson had become something of a mentor to Sarah, checking in regularly on her progress and offering guidance as she navigated her rapidly advancing career. He often told other instructors about the quiet recruit who had surprised everyone, including himself, with her exceptional marksmanship skills. Thompson had learned as much from Sarah as she had from him, particularly about the importance of recognizing potential in unexpected packages. Commander Harrison had kept his promise about opening doors for Sarah's career. She had been fast-tracked through several training programs and was being considered for assignment to special operations units that typically required years of experience to access. Her reputation had preceded her to every new assignment, creating both opportunities and expectations that continued to challenge and motivate her. The most significant change in Sarah's life was her own confidence and sense of purpose. She no longer questioned whether she belonged among elite soldiers. She knew she had earned her place through skill, determination, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. The doubt that had plagued her during those early days of training had been replaced by a quiet certainty about her abilities and her future in the military as she prepared for graduation from the advanced sniper school. Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the first day when she had been dismissed and laughed at by her peers, to the moment when Commander Harrison declared her the best shot he had seen, every challenge had contributed to her growth as both a soldier and a person. Her story had become an inspiration to other soldiers who felt underestimated or overlooked. Proof that excellence could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Sarah regularly received messages from young recruits who had heard her story and found motivation in her example of perseverance and dedication. Looking ahead to her first operational assignment, Sarah knew that her real test was still to come. The controlled environment of training, no matter how challenging, could never fully replicate the pressures and complexities of actual combat operations. But she faced the future with confidence, knowing that she had already proven herself capable of exceeding even the highest expectations. The small woman, who had once struggled to fit into her oversized uniform, had become a symbol of what was possible when natural talent met unwavering determination. Her journey from laughingstock to legend served as a reminder that true capability couldn't be measured by appearance or assumptions, and that the most extraordinary achievements often came from the most unexpected sources.